Rev up your engines! Okay, here we have a Jeep. It didn't start on, and we played with relays, and then it started up. But I think it was more coincidence because he did the starter relay, and it was cranky. There's obviously something going on here. It's got the codes for running too lean on both banks. First, we'll look under the hood. Ignore the rattling plastic. No, they can run lean for lots of reasons. Common is a vacuum leak somewhere where it's sucking air. So we'll make sure everything's on tight, which it is. Don't see any hoses that have fallen off. I don't particularly hear any vacuum leaks. There's nothing obvious. So we're gonna have to look at the data, get out my big computer and analyze everything. You could have a weak fuel pump. First, we want to see what the actual codes are. Turn on the old scan tool and start analyzing. I like it in here because it's 16 degrees outside and it's nice and warm inside. Now, even though this thing has 145,000 miles on it, the heat still works good. Intelligent diagnosis. And the magic wheel spins. Oh, knows it's an 07 Jeep Grand Cherokee. Flex fuel, it's a relatively complicated vehicle now. It can run on all kinds of different fuel. And in the case of this vehicle, I believe it is a fuel problem. Cars often will run lean because they're sucking too much air. But if the fuel pump isn't pumping enough fuel, they'll also run lean. And this is a very complex system on it because it's a flex fuel. Now you can see there's a bunch of reds. We're talking about running problems. You care about the radio, crap like that. What we're looking at is the main computer. You can see the fuel system is lean on both bank 1 and bank 2. So both banks are running lean. It generally means it's not a vacuum leak, because if it's a vacuum leak, one side is going to be leaner than the other. It's got to be something that affects the whole system, not a leak on one side of the intake or the other. Fuel pressure comes to mind to me. Often fuel pressure is low. This is a flex fuel. They have very complex systems that run by the fuel pump, how much pressure it puts out, what the computer tells it to do. In this case, you actually want to pray that it is the fuel pump and not the computer system that runs it, because on a flex fuel, that's really complex. So look at the freeze frame. It happened when it was 203 degrees, but the battery voltage was only 9 volts. Interesting. And as we look further, it was adding 6% long-term on bank 1, but it's subtracting fuel on bank 2. Now this is making things really complex. You got opposite things going on. Now we're looking at another freeze frame, and still the battery voltage is 10.38. That is way too low. And we'll try another freeze frame. There's a lot of freeze frames on this. We're gonna check them all. Again, the battery voltage is too low. In this case, it was adding 27% on bank 1 and 30% on bank 2. That makes more sense. The fact that the other freeze frame was radically different. It's telling me something seems to be an electronic failure. We got low battery voltage. Once you get low battery voltage, all kinds of crazy crap can happen. Believe me, these cars are so complex. If they don't have full voltage, they'll do things that you couldn't imagine. Let's look at the last freeze frame data here. We're going to check them all. And in this one, the battery voltage is 10.07 volts. That's way too low too. We have the short-term fuel trim on both banks exactly the same. It's adding 26.55% at 30 miles an hour. So since it's showing bad battery voltage when it tripped, let's test the battery first. Put the positive on positive. You just put the negative on the negative and the positive on the positive, and we'll test it. 12 volts battery capacity. Battery type, it's a standard battery called cranking. Now we got to set it. At 0, it's 790. And at 32, it's 970. You got to know the temperature outside. Well, it's about 15 now, so we'll guess like 820. So we'll set this at 820 and we'll start it. Well, the battery's great. It's 827. State of charge is 100%. State of health is 100%. So that's good. The charging system. Turn on all loads and speed up to 2,000 RPM. Now we'll turn everything off and we'll rev it up. We find out the battery's 100%. The alternator's good. Passed the ripple test. As you saw, it only had 10.7 volts when it tripped the code. So, what do we have here? Well, something that's very typical with Jeeps. It has a wiring problem somewhere where it's losing voltage between the battery and the rest of the car. It was running, it was going 30 miles an hour according to the data, so the voltage should have been 14 something volts and it was 10. So somewhere there's an electrical short on this thing. Typical for Jeep products. The owner's given me a great clue. When it didn't start, he went to the totally integrated power module here. He whacked it, then it started. Well, this is going to save us a lot of time. It's a typical failure on all these Jeep products. There's many parts integrated in there. That's why it's called totally integrated power management, right? When it's integrated like that, you got to replace the whole thing. The totally integrated power module on this thing is over $600, and it has to be reconfigured for the vehicle using a fancy machine like I have. Some guys will try rebuilt one. I've had very bad experience with them. They'll try used ones, ditto. It's a design flaw of these stupid Jeeps. It's just an expensive monstrosity. And of course, it's also a royal pain in the butt to be absolutely sure that's bad, because it is a module. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. And what happens is the insides of them just short out. And that's why it was only getting 10 point something volts. That also controls how much electricity the alternator's putting out. Everything today is run by computers, and we're just lucky that it gave me that data that showed when that code tripped, it had way too low voltage. And when it does that, the actual data you get from the sensors is meaningless. Because otherwise, well, not including when it didn't start, when you're driving it like now, get on a highway, run 65 fine, no problems at all. If this baby was running that lean, that it had to add 25% fuel, it'd be running like crap on the highway, and it isn't. Since the totally integrated power module is screwing up now and then, when it does, there's no saying what a computer will do. As you saw in that one time, it was adding fuel on one bank and it was subtracting 50% on the other bank, which makes no sense at all. Well, it actually wasn't doing that probably at all. It was just, that's the weird data the computer was reading, since the stupid sensors have really weak power. They only use 5-volt reference signal, and they only use milliamps. So if the power from the battery gets to be too weak, you'll get observed data, which is what this one is doing. From a diagnostic standpoint, hey, it was great that he told me when he beat on that, then it did start, because otherwise we would have to go through the entire electrical system of the car, checking every stinking wire and every stinking sensor. And since this is a flex fuel vehicle, it's got more sensors than normal cars have, and any single one of them can short out. And if it shorts out, it's going to make the computer get weird data. It has nothing to do with the engine itself actually running lead. Those are ghost codes. It's just tripping those codes because the computer's confused by the data that it's getting. That shuts the case on this Jeep. It's a very common problem, these totally integrated power modules on it. Now, this thing runs perfectly fine otherwise, just once in a while it acts up. And the interesting thing is, it's been cold lately, and that's when it started doing this crap. He might find in the summer it won't do it at all because it's warmer outside. I once had a Ford like that in the winter it would act up once in a while, but heck, I was living in Houston, Texas, right? So it's never that cold for very long, and I got a bunch of cars anyways. But in the summer, the thing never acted up, and I drove it 5 years that way. And I sold it to a guy for $200, and he sold it to a guy for $500 because it was the summer and it was still running good. So, absolutely have to have it. You don't have much money? What the heck? Go to a junkyard, try a used one. It's a gamble, but the used one's going to be by itself. They'll hand it to you. Get a flashlight, look around. Look on the bottom side. See if you see any burnt parts. If you see burnt wiring or smell burnt wiring, then don't say, no, this one's no good, I want another one. Or if you want to go halfway, they do make remanufactured ones. They got to guarantee them. So for a lot of people, that's a better deal. They'll go to AutoZone, O'Reilly, or someplace, get a remanufactured one, and it's got a guarantee. It doesn't work, they got to give you your money back. So that's another route that you can take. This one is just going to keep going and see how long it lasts. And if in the summer it doesn't, drive it all summer. Who cares? He's got another car. He can drive that in the winter and drive this one in the summer if he doesn't want to spend that kind of money to put a new assembly in. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.